So, what does it actually look like when a political giant falls? We're about to see. This is the story of Rafael Tuju, a guy who was once a powerful cabinet secretary, only to be unceremoniously evicted from his home. We're going to unpack how a whole lot of money, alleged backroom deals, and political revenge all came together in his pretty dramatic downfall. To really get a grip on this story, we have to start with the number. 2 billion. That's 2 billion Kenyan shillings, the estimated value of the property right at the heart of all this. You see, this isn't just about losing a house. It's about the potential collapse of an entire political and financial dynasty. But the impact wasn't just financial. The source material points out that the eviction actually brought a powerful man to tears right there in public, a sight that people say had never been seen before. And in that moment, this whole thing went from being a legal dispute to a really personal and very public humiliation. So this all leads to the big question, right? Was this just a simple case of a loan gone bad, or were there some darker forces at play behind the scenes? Well, our source material points to two pretty compelling theories, and we're about to dive into both of them. Okay, so the first theory is that this eviction was basically payback, but not from a bank, from the judiciary itself. It paints this picture of an institution allegedly closing ranks to protect one of its own. Now, the backstory here is absolutely crucial. The source material claims Tuju wasn't just some guy with a loan. He actually teamed up with the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission on a sting operation. And who was the target? A judge, who was allegedly trying to get a bribe in his very own case. I mean, talk about a direct challenge to a powerful institution. The source lays this out as a clear, alleged cause and effect, like dominoes falling. First, Tuju exposes a judge. Then, the judiciary supposedly circles the wagons. And the final step? A court ruling comes down swift and hard that strips him of his property. This is presented not as some coincidence, but as a direct consequence. And the conclusion the source draws from this theory, man, it is chilling. The idea is that the eviction wasn't just a punishment, it was a warning. The message to anyone else out there who might think about exposing alleged corruption in the judiciary was crystal clear. This is the price you will pay. But what if the judiciary was only one part of the story? This second theory takes us out of the courtroom and into an even more high-stakes arena: presidential politics. So the official story is a defaulted loan. Simple enough. But the source argues this was just the legal excuse for a political hit. The real crime, it suggests, was Tuju's fierce opposition to William Ruto's presidential campaign. This really highlights the cold, hard math of politics, at least as it's presented in the source. You see, President Ruto could forgive former rivals like Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga because they still had political value. Tuju, on the other hand, had lost his influence. He had nothing left to bring to the table, so his sins were seen as unforgivable. Which kind of begs the question, what exactly were these unforgivable sins? Well, the source points to several very specific actions Tuju took during that really contentious 2022 election. Okay, here's what the source points to. There was an alleged audio recording of Tuju trying to influence an election commissioner. Then there was an incident where he physically blocked the then Deputy President Ruto from entering the Jubilee Party headquarters. And on top of all that, there were repeated public attacks on Ruto in the media. From this perspective, the bad blood was personal, and it was intense. And what added even more fuel to this theory was what happened right after. Close allies of the president were literally filmed publicly mocking Tuju's situation. And for many, this was seen as a clear signal of approval coming from the very top. So was it judicial revenge, political payback, or maybe a bit of both? Whatever the answer is, the source argues that Tuju's fall is a massive cautionary tale for anyone who's in the political arena. This brings us to a really key concept: political liability. Basically, it's any personal weakness, a huge debt, a court case, some skeleton in the closet, that can be turned into a weapon by your opponents. For Rafael Tuju, that 2 billion shilling loan was his political liability. And here's how this plays out in the real world. The source contrasts politicians who have vulnerable physical assets, like real estate or a factory, things that are easy to target and seize, with those whose money is in less tangible stuff, like stocks and bonds. It's a lot harder to go after one anonymous shareholder in a massive company. This very structure of your assets, the source argues, can be the difference between political survival and total ruin. And here is the crucial takeaway. In politics, when your opponent wins, they get the power to activate your liabilities. That court case that was sitting dormant, it can suddenly get fast-tracked. That loan you defaulted on, it can be called in immediately. Tuju backed the losing side, and his liability came due. And this brings us to the final and maybe the most sobering point from the source. It completely reframes Tuju's loss and puts it in a much, much darker context. This source puts the ultimate stakes into perspective with this quote. The suggestion here is that while losing a 2 billion shilling home is absolutely catastrophic, others who have crossed the political establishment have allegedly paid a much, much higher price. So in that light, Tuju's devastating loss is framed as the lesser of two evils. And so, this is where we're left. Rafael Tuju's story is this cautionary tale about power, revenge, and vulnerability. It really forces us all to ask that ultimate question. In the high-stakes game of politics, when you bet everything and you lose, what price will you be forced to pay?